anywhere in the world and speak, if I can't get saunas and I can't do exercise, I don't come in. That's the level of commitment that somebody better make to their life, their health, their happiness, and all of these things. If not, then don't whine if you're sick and getting old. Because we don't get old because of any other reason, but we don't move and we don't exercise. And you could take a 20-year-old person, sit them down, and have them immobilized, and they start to age. Do you realize that? Now here's an old law of physics. How many of you know basic physics? Basic physics is really great. A body in motion stays in motion. A body at rest does what? Decay. It decays. And it's wonderful because how we determine what stays on this planet is anything in use. And anything that's no longer being used, naturally, and thank God, erodes and becomes soil again. Because could you imagine if every living person who's ever been on this earth was still here? Every vegetable, every tree, every animal, we'd all be standing like this, 80 feet tall. So there has to be this constant growth of life and birth and death and demise. And it's this wonderful process, just like the symbiosis of the electric and the organ system speaking to one another through the heart. You don't have to run a marathon. Just get off your rear. Get 30 minutes of walking in most days. It doesn't have to be at once. Just a total of 30 minutes. That's it. You will add years to your life. How many years? Anna just wrote the latest research in the latest magazine. How many of you read our latest magazine? Just came out, so you can get on the Hippocrates website, Healing Our World, and you can see every magazine that's been published since the day I became director in 1980. So it's on there. And she writes about this. And we know that just 30 minutes, 5 days a week walking will prolong your life after a few years by 5 years. How about that? We're not talking about serious exercise. We're just talking you have to get a little hot and worked up. You can't be walking like this and talking back there. You have to at least walk a little brisk. But how would you like 5 years longer in your life just by walking 5 days a week? And the Irish used to be great for walking until you built these goddamn highways. Now you're great at being hit. When I was in Ireland first 40, 50 years ago, everyone walked everywhere. And these bicycles, what happened to the bicycles? They were replaced by BMWs or something? No, just because it's a B doesn't mean bicycles and BMWs do the same thing. But I don't see people walking here like they do. But I do see McDonald's here now. And I used to be so angry when I came here because I was an American addict of television. You didn't have television. So I said, where's television? Oh, it's on 2 hours a night on a Friday. Now you have the same stuff we have, around the clock, 24 hours a day, negative information. You can just lay there in the bed, goofing out with cookies that you dip into milk, organic of course, and go brain dead with this stuff. So this is a very important part of it. Here's a colleague of mine, by the way, he happens to be part of our online program, Dr. Rattay out of Harvard, Associate Clinical Professor of Psychiatry at Harvard, has been a leading proponent on the taming of the mind as a viable tool to reverse heart disease. So one of the many, many endeavors he's had as a wonderful, wonderful brain research scientist, one of the top in the world, top 20 in the world, by the way. He said, no, you can actually reverse heart disease with the mind. And he and I have had these elaborate conversations. Which mind works for the heart best? He said, the one closest to the heart. Which is the one closest to the heart? So every time I make a mistake, I notice that my brain is involved in that. Every time I do the right thing, my heart's involved in that. How many of you see that every single day I teach you this and I still don't always follow it? My heart says, oh, do that, it feels really good. And the brain says, oh, no, it doesn't. Remember back in 1962 what happened? And so you stop doing it, and then bingo, you make a mistake. If you follow the heart, you don't make mistakes. It really is the guide. An internationally recognized expert in neuropsychology, he effectively discovered how stress cross-circuited the neurological system, leading to impairment of the heart muscle and its related ventricles. So not only do you hurt the heart, but you hurt the little veins that lead blood in and out of the heart. By what? Stress. How many of you here have absolutely no stress any time? Raise your hand. So that means 100% of us, including Brian Clement, are hurting our hearts and hurting the vessels that lead blood in and out of our heart. How about that? How many of you think you have moderate amount of stress? Raise your hand. How many of you think you have a lot of stress? Raise your hand. So who do you think is most likely in this group here to have the biggest heart problems? The majority, which was the overwhelming majority. Matter of fact, you had 3 times more people said you have a lot of stress than moderate stress. And very, very few of you, just 2 or 3 of you raised your hand with little to no stress. And even those of us like me that don't think I'm stressed, I have a lot of stress because I live in the world today. If you were listening to my lecture early, I said, how much more stress do we have today than 150 years ago? 15000. Again, Harvard doctor discovered that. And why did I say we have 15000 times more stress? What do we do today that people 150 years ago didn't do? Round-the-clock stress. Again, they have television, they have cell phones, they have cars, they have planes, they have high-speed trains, they have interference 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I'll never forget when cell phones were first introduced. This is not a joke. A guy came to us from Switzerland to Hippocrates. He was a really nice guy. He used to come once or twice a year. And he was one of the men that created the current modern judicial system in Switzerland. And his wife was one of the leaders of yoga. She was like into yoga before I was born. And you know, she used to hold these European International Yoga Conferences, and we come up to Switzerland and we speak. And he said to me one time, look at my suitcase. You know, he had this French, you know, kind of Swiss. I love him. I used to live in Geneva years ago. He said, I've got a cell phone. I said, what's a cell phone? And it looked like a Flintstone phone. You ever see Flintstone? You have to hold it with 2 hands, the whole suit, and the suitcase you carry like this. You know? And he put it to his head, and he said, look at what we can do. And he pulled a number, and I was so completely confused and perplexed. I kept saying, where's the wire? I couldn't get, you could talk on the phone without a wire. And I kept thinking he was joking me or making a story up, and I kept looking, and is the suitcase, let me look at the bottom of the suitcase with no wire. He said, no, the cell phone has communication through the atmosphere. And it was really, he was impressed by it, I was impressed by it. Little did I know at that point that it created brain cancer and got fertility problems going for young people, which we now have established in science. And I can give a 20-hour lecture on that alone. But the reality is, I couldn't believe that you could talk on the phone. And about a year after that, he came back, and I got all excited because he said, oh, I can look at this Flintstone cell phone again. He said, no, I no longer have the cell phone. I said, you got rid of the cell phone? Wow, why did you get rid of the cell phone? He said, I realized that it was interrupting with my life. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, when I used to be driving, I didn't realize I was contemplating. Now I was getting calls. Stop and get some bread on the way home. So my first introduction to cell phones was, this is a wonderful technology, but it's going to interrupt life. And boy, does it interrupt life. My children, by the way, that didn't grow up in a household that was endowed with electronic genius, matter of fact, the opposite. There's something called a-electronic, that's anonymity. No. We still have a hard time taking pictures of other people. We always have our nose in it for some reason. So what I can say to you is that my children can't survive. Most of the young people here, they didn't have a phone. Is that not true, young people?
Yeah.
Your entire world is on that phone. As a matter of fact, my grandchildren are worse than my children. My grandchildren, I mean, you know, if I want something fixed, I go to my 2-year-olds who just learned how to say daddy, mommy, grandpop, and grandma. They're like the geniuses on this stuff. Isn't it true?
Yeah.
Forget the 7-year-old, that's passé. Let's go to the 2-year-old. Amazing stuff. And he talks a lot about this, but if you really want to delve into how dangerous this is, write her name down. She's a friend and colleague. Her name is Dr. Deborah, D-E-B-R-A, Davis. Dr. Deborah Davis. Back when we used to have real presidents in the United States, like Bill Clinton, the worst thing he ever did is like girls. But the reality is, this new guy, we won't even talk about. But the reality, quite simply, is she was his head scientist for 8 years. So all the science that went on and was paid for, billions and billions and billions of dollars of science through the US government, was approved by Dr. Deborah Davis. And by the way, they did a study on cell phones to see if they in fact created brain cancer, and the study came out and said, absolutely not. And she retired, she's young, my age, has a lot of energy and bigger brains than 10 of us. And she read the study and said, do you realize they lied on this study? And she went back and challenged the scientists, the group of scientists that she picked to do that study, and they admitted that the industry stepped in and said, you'll never work a day in your life again if you don't fudge this study. So who became the #1 advocate in the United States and somewhat in the world against cell phones and how it creates disease is Dr. Deborah Davis. So now on top of all of this stress, the 15,000% more I talked about, how many of you stick a cell phone in your ear? But worse than that, Yale University some 20 years ago did a study and said when young men stick cell phones into their pocket, within 30 seconds, I didn't say minutes, I didn't say hours, 30 seconds, 40% of the sperm is neutered. And we said, boy, that's an extremely high number. I happened to be lecturing at Exeter University over in England about 2 years ago. The week we had lectured there, Exeter replicated the study with the same numbers.
Can you say that statistic again?
30 seconds in your pocket, 40% of the sperm is neutered, dead, inactive. Well, we bring gals into this, because it's not only we men that are that stupid to stick a cell phone next to our testicles. Women now put it in their bra. Somehow there is no pockets. Somehow whoever designs clothes think women don't carry anything. Have you noticed that? It's like weird. But so seemingly the bra is not only where you can have attractive bosoms for men to look at, but it's also a place where you can stick cell phones. Now I won't ask any young women to tell me they've done this here, but it's a very common practice with 30-year-olds and 20-year-olds. Well, now Stanford University and University of California, San Francisco have identified a brand new form of cancer that never existed before that comes in the shape and the size of the battery in your cell phone that you put in your breast. How about that? So do you think any of this has anything to do with the electrical system of your heart? Or maybe not. Maybe by putting electric that's abnormal in your body, it's going to make the heart work better. So, well, by the way, before I leave Dr. Rat today, the most impressive book ever written on exercise, you happen to be a reader and a thinker. If you're not a thinker and a reader, don't read this book, because you can't understand it. But it's really, really great stuff. Dr. Ratty talks about nothing that has to do with muscles, nothing that has to do with circulation. He talks about IQ, intelligence, and consciousness through exercise. So if you want to be more conscious, more intelligent, more capable, and keep the brain alive and healthy until you're 100 years old, exercise is one of the many, many keys, but a central key. So then we go over to Germany. So Fobbs found that Hatha Yoga significantly reduced heart disease risk factors. How many of you do Hatha Yoga here? And Hatha Yoga, those of you that are sort of think it's mystical and you can't do yoga because God says don't do yoga and all this weird stuff. No, Hatha Yoga is a calisthenic yoga. It has nothing to do with Eastern philosophy. Hatha Yoga is made specifically to be the best for your body. Matter of fact, years ago I had a friend who's exactly my age, and she had the body when she was 60 of an 18-year-old girl. I mean, honest to God, if you looked at her body, you'd say, my God, this girl, nothing looks different than an 18-year-old girl. But I always joked with her, Gala, I said, you're the only person in the world I know that has a full-time job taking care of yourself. 7 days a week, she did a minimum of 4 hours of Hatha Yoga a day. Never went into the gym, it looked like she lifted heavy weights. Hatha Yoga is powerful yoga. I talk about it, I don't do yoga myself. A few things I don't do that I'm ashamed of, and this is one. Because the older you get, the more what you need. Stretching. Stretching. Because repetitive motion, I even notice myself. I'm not like I was before. You know, repetitive motion changes the way that your body functions. Physical activity lowers many heart disease risk factors, which in turn lowers the risk of developing heart failure as well as other heart disease. University, oh, look at that one. We're going to drive by there in 2 days. Uppsala. That's how they say it. Uppsala in university. Our youngest child told us last year he wants to become a doctor. He said, finally, we're going to pay for something they'll make a living with. But not one of those doctors, one of our doctors. Because this is how he lives and was brought up, etc. And he's probably going to go there to medical school because he's a dual citizen. And in Europe, by the way, you're very civil here. You actually help people to get educated. In America, to become a doctor, your parents better be very, very wealthy because it costs about $1 million. So now, why do you think doctors are so greedy? Even if they don't want to be greedy, they've got to be greedy in America, because if they're not, they can't pay their what? Their loans. It's pretty scary, isn't it? Heart failure is a common disabling disease. It accounts for about 2% of total health care costs in industrialized countries. Risk of death within 5 years of diagnosis is 30% to 50%, researchers say. Think about that. So 2% of our overall cost doesn't sound like a lot, but how about death of 30 to 40 to 50% of the people? And what is heart failure? Well, let's go back and review what I said to broaden your understanding. That means that your heart is not communicating with the other organ systems of your body. That means you're emotionally stressed and you're not breathing and circulation's not moving. It means you're not eating anything but glue and sugar that makes more glue. Into what? Cotton candy. It means that basically your electrical system shut down. And so, of course, if all of that is happening simultaneously, no wonder 30, 40, 50% of us die within a short period of time after we were diagnosed with a heart that doesn't function. And by the way, on top of that, people with heart problems have 6 to 8 times higher amounts of depression. Isn't that interesting? Whoa. So, have you noticed that people who their hearts aren't working, they're not happy, perky people? We're athletic people running around eating healthy food, glowing and flowing, as we say. They seem to be pretty perky. They don't seem to have depression a lot. They seem to be positive a lot. Maybe you ought to think about that a little bit. And so how we know this to be an absolute fact is when we have the person that comes in with light to moderate depression, in one half the cases, if I can just get them to do light aerobic exercise, by the end of the 3-week program, they'll no longer have depression. Let me repeat what I just said to you, and challenge me on this one. If you're depressed, I challenge you on this one. That in a 3-week program, matter of fact, usually I don't see them until the second, third day they're there, so it's really 2 weeks, a little more than 2 weeks, or maybe 2 weeks. That if I can just get you to do light to moderate aerobic exercise, and we have all the gyms and equipment there, and exercise classes, and everything that you can possibly imagine, one half of the people that say I had depression will report to us at the end of their stay they no longer have depression. And have we done something radical? As Dr. Cooper said, a renowned research scientist, all we have to do is get off our rear.